Hey up everyone, welcome back to the Rugby League History channel once again. Today on the channel I'll be doing my tips and predictions for round 18 of the 2025 NRL season. Last week I had a really good round, I got 6 out of 8 correct. So this round has been affected by state of origin as well. So players will be missing, not as many games to cover this week. But let's start off with the first one, which kicks off on Friday night. And that first match is between Canterbury, Bankstown and Brisbane. This one's being played at Stadium Australia. Canterbury, Bankstown in second at the moment on the table and Brisbane fifth on the table. Brisbane come into this match having won their last 3 matches in a row in the league, and just over a month ago everyone were talking about a crisis at Brisbane, but they've silenced everyone for a bit now with them 3 wins in a row. They come into this match full of confidence. Canterbury had a loss last week against Penrith, very narrow loss. These two sides met earlier in the year, where Brisbane inflicted Canterbury's first defeat of the season in very wet conditions up there at Suncorp Stadium, very heavy rain. And one thing I've learned about Canterbury this year is that when it comes to wet weather rugby, they're not the best. So if it's raining in Sydney on Friday night, it might prove a factor in this game. Both sides are going to be affected by state of origin, but I'm actually going to tip Brisbane to win this one. I'm going to go for Brisbane to win by 1 to 12 points. They're on a bit of a roll at the moment, and I think they can make it 4 wins in a row in the league. First match on Super Saturday is between Canberra and St George. This one's being played at Bruce Stadium in Canberra. Canberra first on the table at the moment, and St George in 11th. St George have a shocking record at Bruce Stadium. Since 1999 they've only won 4 games there, and at one stage they lost 11 straight matches in a row when they travelled down to the nation's capital. Last week St George had a high scoring win over Parramatta. However, I will point out that if it weren't for Josh Adokar putting his foot on the sideline, then I think St George would have lost. They had a great first half against Parramatta, and then they just put the cue in the rack, and Parramatta, well, if it weren't for that no try, I think Parramatta would have gone on to win that game. The momentum was clearly in their favour, and that no try decision were like a lead balloon, but they're up against it this week against the Canberra side that they've won 6 matches in a row in the league. They are playing well. I will say that that Faders tag is still very real though, because there has been a couple of times this year where they've, especially the last 2 matches in a row, where they've looked like they're going to go on and win the game, and they've let the other team come back into it and nearly steal it. We've seen that twice in a row, and I think that's something that they're going to really have to sort out before finals, because in the final series, especially if they make the grand final or preliminary final, anything like that, you have to play 80 minutes. You can't play 50 minutes, you can't play 60 minutes, otherwise you will be found out. But long story short, who do I think is going to win this game? I think if Canberra show up ready to play, which I think they will, I'll go for Canberra to win this match for 13 plus. So the men from the capital will win this match by 13 plus. The second match on Super Saturday is between North Queensland and Melbourne. This one's being played at the Queensland Country Bank Stadium in Townsville. North Queensland sat 12th on the table, Melbourne 3rd. Melbourne have won 4 matches in a row coming into this fixture in the league. However, they've lost 3 matches in a row when they've travelled up to Townsville to play against North Queensland. So in recent times, North Queensland have had the wood over them up in Townsville. Last week, North Queensland had a vital win over Gold Coast, very high scoring match. In the end, North Queensland, they shut up shop towards the end of the game. They let Gold Coast back into it. And Melbourne had a pretty routine win over Cronulla Sutherland. For this match, it's going to be heavily affected by state of origin. Lots of players missing from both sides. You know, if North Queensland had all their players on deck, I might give them a bit of a chance against Melbourne. And even though Melbourne do have a few players out for state of origin, I'm leaning more towards them, so I'll tip Melbourne to win by 1 to 12 points. However, I'd love to see North Queensland beat them again up in Townsville. First match on the Sunday is between Sydney Roosters and West Tigers. This one's being played at the new Sydney Football Stadium Eastern 6th at the moment and West's in 14th place on the table. Sydney Roosters have won their last 8 matches against the West Tigers. West come into this match having lost 6 matches in a row in the league, and now the media are starting to talk about it. They're starting to talk about Benji Marshall's future again. Another promising player that they've had through their ranks has left the club to go to Parramatta, De Silva, and that just is another slap in the face to West Tigers fans out there. Another promising junior's left the club. Apparently he was unhappy with the minutes that he was getting and that he was playing behind Coruscant, so he's out the door. And the pressure's really on West Tigers and Benji Marshall, because everyone thought that this season was going to be a turning point. It was going to be a new dawn, and it just seems like it's the same old shite at the club. And they're coming up against an Eastern Suburbs side who are coming off the bye. They'll be fresh, and on top of that, they've shown this year that, look, at the start of the year, a lot of people wrote them off and said that they weren't going to be that competitive. There's a high player turnover and all sorts going on, and yet they're still competitive. And another thing that doesn't look good for West Tigers is in the last 3 matches that they've played against Sydney Roosters, they've conceded 140 points. And their game against Manly last week, West Tigers, a lot of people said in the comments section the first half were diabolical. It were like watching Ron Massey Cup. So, look, maybe West Tigers could win this game. They could surprise me. I'm not going to write them off entirely, but I'm going to go for Sydney Roosters to win this match, and I'm going to go for them to win by 1 or 12 points on Sunday. And the final match to close us out is on Sunday as well. It's between Manly Warringah and South Sydney. This one's being played at Brookvale. Manly 9th on the table, South Sydney in 16th. A lot of history between these two clubs. They've met 151 times since 1947. 73 wins to South, 78 wins to Manly. In total, at Brookvale Oval, South have gone there 62 times, 27 wins and 34 losses. A lot of people are talking about, in the media, there's a crisis at Manly, there's a crisis at Newcastle. But how about fucking South Sydney? Where's the crisis talks there? They're second last on the table. They're coming into this fixture having lost 4 matches in a row in the league. 5 matches, I should say, making it sound even worse. And they conceded 50 last week against Redcliffe, so they joined the 50 club. Before the season started, everyone fucking said South Sydney definite top 8 club. Wayne Bennett back, Cameron Murray, Latrell Mitchell, Jack Whiten, Campbell Graham, all these players, they've got the squad on paper to be maybe even top 4, and they're fucking second last, and yet nobody in the media is talking about them. And with Manly, as I mentioned earlier in the video with the West Tigers game, they won, but a lot of people said it was a diabolical game of rugby. It was almost Ron Massey Cup level. So I think the pressure's really on for both clubs, both head coaches as well, Seabold and Bennett, to get a result here. So it's a huge game for both sides. With South Sydney as well, if they don't win this game, with the Gold Coast having a bye, they'll be equal on points with them. So South Sydney will try to win this game and get some breathing space between them and last place Gold Coast. Who's going to win this game? Honestly, I do not know. But I'd have to say, even though both sides will have players out for Origin, I'm going to go for Manly to win this game by 1 or 12 points. So those are my tips and predictions for round 18 of the 2025 NRL season. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know in the comment section below. Let me know who you're tipping and all the score margins and all that caper. Thanks to everyone last week that watched my video. It was one of the most watched tipping videos on YouTube. Thanks very, very much for tuning in and giving me a chance. So anyways, I'll catch you all later in the next video. Tatty bye for now.